Good morning. Prayer. It's really hard to talk about it because in a way it presupposes some expertise. And I suspect I have as many good times and bad times and difficulties with prayer as many of you might. But perhaps I can share some of my experience of prayer and the meaning it has had for me. Like a good story, mine begins once upon a time. As a child, I learned to pray before meals, seated around a table with my parents and 3 siblings, giving thanks and asking a blessing for the food we were about to eat, reciting a prayer we all knew by memory. Later in the evening, after brushing my teeth and dressing for bed, I ritually knelt at my bedside, reciting a prayer I had learned by memory. As I grew older and my parents no longer came to sit on my bed while I said my prayers, I would be reminded that it was time for bed, to be sure to brush my teeth and say my prayers. By that time in my life, I had learned to fear the old man who kept a book of wrongdoings, the one who was in heaven. And not saying bedtime prayers would get a black mark beside my name. That image was more of an encouragement to pray than the parental reminder. Unfortunately, that image of God lasted a longer time than I like to admit. Fortunately, I did come to know of the unfathomable love of God that is for me, and to know that there is nothing I can do to diminish that love, nor is there anything I can do to increase that love. The foundation of my relationship with God is that I am dependent on grace, I am deeply loved, and I am met in the reality of my life by this God of love. Prayer, I've come to know, is a natural outcome of this relationship with God. It's a conversation with a very good friend, one who knows me even better than I know myself, even better than my husband of many years knows me. I admit that it has taken a long time for me to bring myself before God, just as I am, warts and all. There are many, many ways of praying that are appropriate, and I have deepened my relationship with God through many of those practices. But the one prayer practice that has been and continues to be arguably the most useful practice for me is the prayer of examen. It is a time of reflection on my thoughts, feelings, and actions of the day, and is a time when I invite God to shine light on those areas which I need to notice and pay attention to. I have found this practice to be primarily a prayer of awareness. Instead of focusing on the moralistic evaluation of good or bad conduct, not primarily to find the sins and faults committed throughout the day, but to discover how God's Spirit is moving in and through my life and attracting me towards that Spirit. The examination of consciousness, commonly referred to as the examen, sounds like an interrogation, which it is not. Neither is it a means of self-analysis with the goal of self-perfection. It is a time to become aware of that holy presence in my day's activities and events. I used to wrestle with a spirituality of striving, of grasping, and I used to think I had to be more or do more to please God. The examen changed all of that for me. Before I began to incorporate the examen into my daily prayer life, spirituality was about doing lots of things for God. Weekly worship, praying more, reading spiritual books, retreats, workshops, and the list goes on. I viewed these things as items to mark off my spiritual checklist. Prayed extra? Check. Spent more time in prayer than the day before? Check, check. Looked wholly to myself by doing all the things I was doing? Triple check. This striving and grasping kept me from seeing that a relationship with God is about being, not endless doing. It is continual and evolving. The prayer of examine is a way of honestly assessing life in the light of God's love and mercy. It has been primarily a way to assess my active discipleship in ways that I had not ever considered. It has been and continues to be a nightly ritual for me to become more aware of noticing where God is at work in my life, taking only 10 to 20 minutes. When asking the question in the examine, God, what did you see in my day today that you would like for me to pay attention to? I began to notice how blinded I had become in seeing the person I had encountered by thinking about whatever was next on my agenda rather than really being with that person. I began to be intentional about a ministry of small things, purposefully with another rather than about my life. It could be just a smile, a warm greeting, a note, or a card, all to say, you matter to me. Often it was a brief conversation with the person who was checking out my groceries, clerking at the post office, serving me in a restaurant, but always inquiring about their day and how they were. The examine helped guide this new way of being for me as I was reminded by my feelings and emotions that surfaced, or noticing times where I had been kind, helpful, encouraging, generous, or other times when I had resisted God's invitation to serve, to love, to give, to hope. I've seen patterns of my attitudes, my responses, and my behaviors change, grow, and deepen. I have found this as a time intended to be a gentle way of reviewing my day's activities and encounters with others under an umbrella of God's love and grace. It has provided an opportunity to restore relationships and deepen friendships. My routine of praying the examine helped me pay attention to the words of Jesus in today's gospel reading. How can you say to your brother or sister, let me remove that splinter in your eye, when you do not notice the wooden beam in your own eye? It seems that Jesus accuses them of being too quick to find fault with others, while at the same time remaining blind to their own shortcomings. There are some very simple steps to pray the examine. Celebrate being in the presence of God and giving thanks for my many blessings, filled with gratitude. Then pray for God's illumination as I examine the events and encounters of the day, sifting through the joys, sorrows, struggles, and delights of the day, and asking God for the needed grace. Finally, resting in God's grace while living in the hope for the next day. There will be a small card available here in the vestibule following the Ash Wednesday, or on Ash Wednesday, and it will have those steps listed for you. The prayer of examine may be practiced in solitude, but it is ultimately about community, about relationships to self, God, and others. If you've not prayed the examine before, or if it is a regular practice, I encourage you to think about the 2 opportunities each week of Lent on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 7:30 to 8 o'clock, to pray with a group of others here in the parish online. There is no preparation except to show up. However, it is necessary to register for the Zoom link. Just go to the parish website, click on the Lent page, and complete the simple form. Also on the Lent page, you'll find other prayer and mission offerings you could select to practice during the 6 weeks of Lent. So as we enter the season of Lent this coming week, I encourage you to notice where God is in your day's activities, and to know that the Examine is a helpful prayer practice to assist you in doing that. Thank you.